Hey everyone, it's Carissa Wiley at sprinkledwithglitter.com. Thanks for joining me today. Today I am sharing a trifecta of cards. Yes, I said trifecta. That feature a love theme, and I love that these products can be used throughout the year, no matter what time it is. It's a good time to tell somebody you love them. And this is Concord and Knight's January 2023 release. It's not the entire release, but here are a few products I picked to feature. The first is this Love Lines die set. Now this coordinates with the new Love Lines Turnabout, and I love me a good little framed heart, and these little tiny hearts as well as that larger heart feature that delicate frame, but I'm going to be using the love, love, love you sentiment. Now, I really thought I was going to use this quilt top die set and feature those kind of split in half quilted hearts. I didn't end up pulling those in. When I started creating, they just didn't feel right, but I did use this perfect Matchbox die set. Now, this set creates an adorable Matchbox, but it also has these fun little like decorator dies for the Matchbox, and I'm going to use that little rainbow there. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is die cut this Love, Love, Love You die 3 times. I'm going to cut it from Concord and Ninth white cardstock, which I have backed with some sheet adhesive from Altenew. You can use any sheet adhesive you prefer, but I find that the adhesive really helps when you're working with a really intricate die like this and you want to stack them up. Now, the stacking is completely optional for you. I mean, this is probably a little over the top when it comes to fussiness, but I love that dimension, and it doesn't bother me to take a little extra time, cut a couple extra die cuts, and then stack them up. Now, because the adhesive is already on the back, I am laying them on a backer sheet of the adhesive that I already placed on the back of that just to hold them in place so they don't stick to anything and get warped and rip and all that. And then for the final layer, I'm die cutting some of this matte gold cardstock from Concord and Ninth, and that's going to be the top of my stack. And I just left that in the die for now so that I wouldn't lose any pieces or kind of pull it apart. Now, once I have everything die cut, I'm going to start stacking these up. Now, I will tell you, I made a second card, and the second one I did a little bit better on, and I did not film it, of course. But instead of stacking these up on each other just like this, I added it on to the shadow layer first and then stacked them up. That made my life a lot easier, but do as I say, not as I do. Now, after I have these 3 layers stacked up, you can see how beautiful and delicate that die cut is. I am going to start working on some other die cutting, and I've pulled some cardstocks out for my mini rainbow there. I've also grabbed some vellum, and I am going to die cut the shadow layer from that Love Lines sentiment die and the little mini clouds from the perfect Matchbox die set from that vellum. Now, I'm also going to put a little bit of adhesive on the backs of these different colors of cardstock to cut my mini rainbow from. Now, as I mentioned before, this mini rainbow was designed to go on top of the Matchbox to kind of decorate that. But I'm using it a little outside of the box today, no pun intended, to create a little just focal element for the side of this sentiment. So I'm going to cut the rainbow first out of the pink cardstock, then out of Stardust cardstock, and then out of Sea Glass cardstock. So this is the color combination I've chosen. I did end up changing that pink color cardstock to a little bit brighter pink in the end, but you're going to kind of get the gist of what I'm doing here. And a couple of these I had adhesive on the back of already because I keep a little stash of these cardstocks with some adhesive on the back. And some of them I had to add the adhesive to, but it's not really a big deal. So luckily, because the adhesive's on the back, they all kind of stay together in one clump instead of coming apart in these individual little bows. So I'm able to just add the Stardust cardstock onto the middle bow of this rainbow here on the Sea Glass cardstock. And then I added the pink bow on the outer edge of that, and that creates my rainbow. Now I still have the backer on the adhesive on the back of that Sea Glass cardstock, and that's kind of maintaining it all together. But eventually I'm going to pull that backer off and add some foam adhesive to keep that rainbow all in one piece, since they are 3 separate little pieces. Now I'm adding my vellum clouds on there, and I'm just using a touch of liquid glue so that it doesn't like glob out and show too much on the back side of my vellum. And I felt like this arrangement needed one more little piece. So I am going to white heat emboss this Over the Rainbow For You sentiment. It's from the Brighter Days stamp set from Concord and Ninth onto some sea glass cardstock. So I prepped the surface with some powder tool, stamped it in some Versamark ink, and then I sprinkled on my white embossing powder and heat set that. Now I'm using my mini trimmer here just to trim that down to a manageable size, and eventually I will cut the right edge of this into a little banner shape. So I have this sentiment here, and now I'm just going to kind of tuck it behind that stacked up sentiment, and somewhere along the way I added that gold layer to the top, and I forgot to include that in here. But I did it in the same way that I stacked up those original die cuts. Now, also new this month from Concord and Ninth are these adorable, and I mean adorable, heart enamel shapes. And so I am adding kind of this grapefruit color to the center of those O's, and I'm adding a few more of those hearts sprinkled on my clouds as well as my sentiment strip. Now, I couldn't quite figure out what I wanted to do on the background, and then I remembered this Happy Rays Turnabout stamp from Concord and Ninth. I love this stamp. It is so fabulous. It's one of their turnabouts, and if you've never used a Concord and Ninth turnabout stamp before, I do have a video showing how to use these stamps from start to finish in conjunction with the all-in-one turnabout jig. And so I'm going to link that in the upper right-hand corner right now so that you can check that out. Now, once I have my stamp mounted on the Misty door, I'm going to go ahead and add my white cardstock. This is Concord and Ninth white cardstock onto my all-in-one turnabout jig. I'm going to prep the surface with a powder tool because I am going to add some heat embossing to a couple of these stampings. And I have my jig in the number 1 position, or with the number 1 in the upper right-hand corner. I've inked up my stamp with some Ballet slipper ink, and I'm just stamping that onto my cardstock. And then I'm going to clean my stamp, add some Versamark ink, and stamp right over the top of that in the same position. Now, you can do this another way, which I'm about to show you. But let me get this stamped first. And I'm going to stamp this Versamark and Ballet slipper combination in the number 1 position and in the number 3 position. So I'm going to go ahead and skip number 2 and 4 for now. And I've turned my all-in-one turnabout jig to the position where the number 3 is in the upper right-hand corner. And this time I'm going to ink up the stamp with Versamark ink, and then directly on top of that Versamark ink, I'm going to add my Ballet slipper ink. It does not hurt your Ballet slipper ink pad at all. I've done this for years, and I'm going to go ahead and stamp both of the inks at once. That way I have the layer of Versamark ink and the layer of Ballet slipper, and I've stamped it in both the 1 position and the 3 position. Now I'm taking note of my stamping here because when I place it back on my jig, I want to make sure I'm positioning it in the same position that it was before. And I've removed my cardstock from the jig, and now I'm adding Fairy Dust embossing powder from Brutus Monroe. It is a clear embossing powder with a little bit of glitter in it, and I thought this would be perfect for the card that I'm making. Now, once I have my embossing powder heat set, I'm going to go ahead and place my cardstock back onto the jig in the same position that it was before. If you need to mark it with a pencil, you could do that in the upper right-hand corner. And you can kind of see that sparkle and shine that's on there. So now I'm going to rotate my turnabout jig to the number 2 position, and I am going to stamp this in Ballet slipper ink. Now, I'm not going to do any heat embossing on these last 2 layers, so I'm just going to ink and stamp. And then I'm going to turn my turnabout jig to the number 4 position, meaning that the number 4 is in the upper right-hand corner of my jig. And I'm going to stamp again with Ballet slipper ink. So now I have my completed background with all of these happy rays. I think it is so beautiful. Now I wanted to mention that when you remove your cardstock from your all-in-one turnabout jig, because it is like a sticky mat, you're going to want to roll the jig away from the cardstock. That's going to keep your cardstock from getting warped or bent or kind of ruined as you remove it from the all-in-one jig. Now I've gone ahead and cut this background down, and when I placed this on there, I really felt like it needed a little glow where that center circle is. And so I'm doing a really kind of lazy method of masking here. I'm just taking some Post-it tape and tearing off little pieces and kind of going around that circle part way. And then I'm going to take the Concord and Ninth Buttercup ink and just blend in from the right side of that circle into the center. I'm not going over the entire circle. I just wanted to add a little glow. Now it was a little bright, so I just took one of my pink blending brushes and I didn't even ink it up at all. I just used the ink that was on there and I blended over the top of that, and that gave it a little more of like an orangey kind of glow there. It kind of bridges the gap between pink and orange and yellow a little bit, kind of softens that yellow. Now I have a cloud. I have die cut it from the Concord and Ninth white glitter cardstock. I'm adding some liquid glue to the back and I'm adhering it right kind of to the lower right hand corner of that little center circle there. And to add my sentiment grouping, I added some foam adhesive to the back of that, and I'm just adding a little bit of liquid glue over the top of that foam adhesive because number one, I need it to stick to that glitter cardstock really well. And also I wanted to have a little wiggle room when I place this down onto my card front to make sure I had it in the position that I wanted it. I die cut 2 more of those little mini clouds. Those are from the Perfect Matchbox die set. And I popped those up on the upper left of this card, and that completes my first card. Now, I made a second card just like this. The sentiment grouping's all the same, but I placed it on a plain white background, and it's beautiful as well. I can't decide which is my favorite, so you're gonna have to let me know in the comments below which one of those is your favorite. Now, I kind of was playing around with these rainbows and I found a fun way to use them. I'm going to create a regular rainbow and then I'm going to run that through and die cut my rainbow again, but I'm going to use the back side of these rainbow die cuts. So it doesn't really kind of make a whole lot of sense, but I'm going to use it in the opposite direction. So I wanted to keep these pieces of the Stardust together. So I removed it from the die using a piece of Post-it tape to hold all those pieces together. And then I added some score tape just to keep those all together on what would be really considered the front side of these dies. Now to soften the edges of these backs of the die cut, since I'm using it kind of in the mirror image, I went ahead and used my bone folder to smooth out the edges. And now I'm adding the various colors of the bows to that Stardust rainbow that's below. Once again, softening the edges of that back side of that die cut with my bone folder. And I'm just using a little bit of liquid glue for the pink one. I had some of that adhesive sheet on the blue one. So I'm just adhering this all together. And now when I have 2 of these, I can put them together and create the most adorable heart. I think it's a fun and modern way to use this die in a different way completely. And I think this kind of striped heart gives me really that like groovy 70s vibe. So I'm going to bring in that vibe with my sentiment as well. I'm going to use the Hugs sentiment from the Happy Rays stamp set that I used earlier, that Turnabout stamp set. And I'm going to stamp it 3 times onto this panel of white cardstock. Now I've lined up my sentiment in my Misty stamping tool, and I'm actually using the all-in-one Turnabout jig as a sticky mat in my Misty stamping tool. So I'm starting by inking up the sentiment in Stardust ink and stamping it right onto this panel. Then I'm going to take my all-in-one Turnabout jig and I'm going to move it down just 1 square. It's going to look like 2 squares here. I ended up adjusting it up another square, so just 1/4 of an inch down. I've inked it up in Grapefruit ink and then I'm going to stamp. So that's going to overlap just a little bit. Then I'm going to return the all-in-one Turnabout jig to its original position and move it up 1/4 of an inch. I'll ink up the stamp in sea glass ink and stamp a 3rd time. So I kind of have this like echoing sentiment there on the bottom. Now, when I was creating with the Happy Rays die set for the first time, I actually had that Hug sentiment already stamped and die cut out in the Stardust ink. So I decided to go ahead and place that over the Stardust stamped version that's already on the panel. So I'm going to do that with some foam adhesive, and you can see I'm adding my heart to the top of this panel with some foam adhesive as well. Now I can't resist these enamel hearts, so I'm grabbing a couple more of these small enamel hearts and I'm putting them between the letters on that popped up Hugs sentiment. I think it's so cute. And you can see I have my little panel created. I decided to place this white panel onto a top folding ivory colored A2 size note card to kind of give it that vintage 70s vibe. And that finishes off my second card for today. Now for the third card, I completely repeated that first card arrangement one more time. I just added it to a linen note card instead for a little texture in the background. And I honestly cannot decide which of these cards is my favorite. I am thrilled with all of them. I love them all. They're right up my alley. And you could say I'm over the rainbow for them. Now, as always, I will have links to the products used in these projects in the YouTube description below. So if you're looking for something in particular, be sure you check there. Or you can head on over to my blog at sprinkledwithglitter.com. I'll have that linked below as well. Over there, you'll find more still shots, more information, and a complete list of supplies. As always, thank you so much for stopping by and hanging out with me today. I hope you enjoyed these projects, and I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, be sure to give this video a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notifications here on my YouTube channel so you don't miss any of my paper crafting and card making video tutorials I share here. And if you loved this video, I would love it if you would share it with a friend. Let me know in the comments below which of these 3 cards is your favorite. Thanks again for watching, and until next time, I hope you have a fabulous day.